move to the presentation of the candidate for honorary degree. You will note that a more complete biography of Parisa Khosravi is included in the program. Therefore, I will not recount her many accomplishments at this time. Norman Masri, please escort Parisa Khosravi to the podium.
President Stefanko, I have the honor to present Parisa Khosravi for the degree Doctor of Humane Letters, honoris causa, and request that you confer upon her this degree with all its rights and privileges.
Parisa Khosravi, in a broadcast career that stretched 3 decades, you shined a light on parts of the world Western news cameras rarely visited. You opened news bureaus across the continents and enlisted people on those continents to report their stories. As an immigrant, you are aware of the rewards of sharing our perspectives rather than clashing over them. As a journalist, you use diplomacy to meet heads of state to ensure reporters are able to travel safely in and out of dangerous areas. As a mother, you are open to sharing struggles that are familiar to countless people of all ages and nationalities, for giving voice to the voiceless. Far away and close to home, the College of St. Rose is pleased to confer upon you, Parisa Khosravi, the degree of Doctor of Humane Letters, honoris causa, with all its rights and privileges. President Stefanko?
By virtue of the authority vested in me by the Board of Trustees of the College of St. Rose and the Board of Regents of the State of New York, now, therefore, I admit you, Parisa Khosravi, to the degree Doctor of Humane Letters, honoris causa, with all its rights and privileges, and cause you to be invested in the official colors of the College of St. Rose. I am pleased that Dr. Khosravi has agreed to deliver this year's commencement address.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. It's wonderful to be with you here today and celebrate our graduates. My hearty congratulations to our class of 2018. I am going to talk about a few topics today, including persistence, perceptions, and compassion. As you pursue your careers, stay true to yourself and follow your passion and do what gives you joy. I was lucky to find my passion pretty early on in life. In fact, I remember the day down to the hour when I decided to pursue journalism. I was watching the live coverage of the release of the American hostages from Iran. I had followed that story for months, every night watching Ted Koppel and his program, America Held Hostage, day number, whatever it was, which then eventually became Nightline. So the day that it was announced that the hostages will be released, I was just so happy and I was glued to the TV. When their plane arrived at Rhein-Main Air Base in Germany, and I remember watching as the stairs were put next to the plane and these former hostages one by one started stepping down the stairs and being greeted by officials. The only other people I could see on the tarmac besides them were the journalists running around on the tarmac and speaking and interviewing these former hostages. It was so exciting. I wanted to be right there. I wanted to be in the middle of it all. I had some questions of my own for them. So the next day, I went to my English teacher, Mr. Wagner. I was a sophomore in high school then. I said, Mr. Wagner, I want to be a journalist. What do you suggest I do? And he said, "Oh, Parisa, you know, journalism is such a tough field. It's so competitive. English is your second language and you have an accent." So he didn't really encourage me. And I thought, well, what does he know? He doesn't know me. He doesn't know what I can do. And I left the class that day and I did not speak to him about this topic ever again. I did not need his discouragement. And I want to underline this point for all of us at any age. Why would we ever allow someone else to tell us what we're capable of? I went to college. I majored in broadcast journalism. I did 7 internships at the time, almost one every semester. I did a semester abroad. And when CNN came to recruit, just before my graduation, I had a little resume to hand to them. And I remember the lady asked me, she said, "Why would you consider a job that pays so little?" And in fact, it paid so little that the part-time job I had while I was going to school was paying me more than my full-time CNN job was going to pay me. But I told her, I said, I want the experience more than I want the money. I could have easily stayed in Chicago and gotten a job that paid quite a bit more, but it would have been local news. My interest was around international news. And I didn't want a short-term monetary gain to derail me from my long-term vision and interest in international news. Don't let money be the deciding factor for you, especially as you begin your careers. As you grow older, success will look very different, and doing what you believe in and enjoy will be a big part of your happiness and your fulfillment. I grew up at CNN, so I worked from that entry-level position to become senior vice president in charge of all international news gathering. That meant all our bureaus, all our correspondents, all our teams, all our crews around the world, assignment desks, any breaking news that you saw, non-breaking news that you saw throughout the years. And for a while, I simultaneously ran domestic news gathering and became the company's first global ambassador, which meant that I traveled the world and dealt with crises and met with leaders and officials and ensured that our journalists could get into difficult parts of the world where freedom of speech is in no way guaranteed. I directed the coverage of countless historic events, from the fall of East Bloc to the genocide in Rwanda to the Arab Spring. In my experience as a journalist for the past 3 decades, much has changed in our field and the way journalists are viewed. That is indeed another talk to itself. However, 2 areas which have specially changed the way we gather news are technology and safety. You know, we used to have to haul around 2,000-pound satellite dishes in order to be able to transmit live from remote parts of the world in a breaking news situation. In fact, that's how we covered the first Iraq war. Some of you may remember, probably the parents, not the students, but some of you may remember that CNN was the only news organization that was live the night the war started in Baghdad during the first Iraq war. And all the other news organizations took our signal from around the world. And from then on, CNN really became a household name, and the expectations of the audience grew with it. And so whenever something happened, they expected to turn on the TV and see it live on CNN. Well, it wasn't like there was an on and off switch in the backdrop. It was a lot of folks running around, moving mountains in order to make this happen. I'll share with you an example where I didn't have to move a mountain, but I did divert a commercial airliner. This was back in the early 90s. Somalia was in a horrible state of civil war and widespread famine. UN, with the US in the lead, passed a resolution to pass to start a major humanitarian aid mission to the country. For some reason, and I don't quite remember what, the vote on this resolution was moved up by a few days. So we lost that time to get ourselves on location. So we were scrambling. And we were getting ourselves positioned in the neighboring country, Kenya, and then we were going to charter into Mogadishu in Somalia. One of the major parts of our equipment that we had to move around was this huge, the 2,000-pound satellite dish I was referring to. It's actually called a flyaway. This thing was sitting in Cyprus. At the time, we had a bureau there. So we had to move it from Cyprus to Kenya, and there weren't that many flights available between these two countries. So as we were looking at it, it wasn't like we had Google that you can just easily Google and see what flights and connections you could make. So as we were kind of hitting walls, trying to make connections and trying to get there in a timely manner, it wasn't working out. So we thought, all right, let's try to charter. And the charters were just too small. They couldn't get all these huge boxes inside, this cargo. So I thought, all right, let's think backwards. What are the next few flights arriving in Kenya, and where are they originating from? And let's go there. And one of them was coming from London. And I thought, okay, that's an easier connection from Cyprus to London, and we can catch the flight. But unfortunately, that flight would have already taken off by the time we got there. So I thought, what if we call the airline and ask them if at all they would consider kind of stopping by in Cyprus and picking us up? Now, all my colleagues thought I was a little crazy, and I said, well, let's just try it anyway. We really don't have any other choice. So one of my colleagues in the region called the airline, and for the sake of the airline, I won't name their name. And she called me back and she said, Parisa, you won't believe this, but they're asking, how much are we willing to pay? And I thought, well, now this is a negotiation. And, just a little background. It would take upwards of $80,000, $90,000, $100,000 to move this equipment in a breaking news situation, and as we would check it in as excess baggage. It was very expensive to move around. We had about 4 folks in Cyprus, so 4 business class seats, so easily a $100,000 trip. So I wanted to offer something that was chunky enough for them to be interested to negotiate with us, but at the same time leave myself plenty of room to negotiate up. So I said to her, offer $30,000. She called me back and she said they accepted $30,000. And I thought, wow, we might even get a bargain in the process here. But they wanted the money wired right away, because if they were going to change flight paths and get landing rights, they had to ensure that we were serious. So by this time now, it was 3 in the morning. I actually worked on this part of the thing for 28 hours straight. I didn't go home, I didn't sleep, I was just 28 hours straight working. So it was 3 a.m., and I called my boss, I woke him up, and I said, don't ask me any questions. If there's any chance of us getting there on time, you have to approve $30,000 being wired right away. And he's a wise man, he just said, okay, fine, I don't even know what to ask you, go ahead. And I asked our bureau chief to wire the money. And now we had hours to wait before that flight would take off and kind of be en route. And meantime, I was moving other people around, but I was really concerned that we were just waiting and sitting around waiting, and maybe if they won't show up, and maybe I've just lost $30,000 on top of that. So around the time the plane was supposed to be in the region, my colleague talked her way up to the control tower at the airport. This was pre-9/11 days, so we had a very different world. And she called me up and she said, Parisa, they see the plane on radar, and it's descending, and it's descending, and it's landed. So I was just jumping up and down in the middle of the newsroom by myself. I was so excited. I knew we had pulled something major. Failure was not an option. We had to be there, and I wasn't going to give up. And the most ridiculous suggestion and idea of diverting a commercial airliner actually worked. Endless persistence is often a major part to our success. Success is not about perfection. So much of it has to do with persistence. And I just want to give you a quick punchline to this story because the plane was coming from London. London is actually one of the biggest hubs for international news organizations. So our major international bureau outside, of course, outside the home country, is in London. So NBC, CBS, ABC, us, of course the Brits themselves, BBC, ITN, a bunch of international other networks, they all wanted to do what we were doing. They wanted to get to Kenya and then on to Mogadishu. So that plane was full of other journalists. So you can imagine what had happened when in the middle of the flight, the pilot had come on and said, we're making an unscheduled landing in Cyprus to pick up CNN. Folks on that plane were not happy. Not only were they getting a little delayed, but the competition was getting on board. All that to say that nowadays, we can do a live shot with our cell phones. With our cell phones, and any time you FaceTime or you use Skype or any other app, you're doing a live shot. And compare that to hauling around 2,000-pound satellite dishes and diverting planes. As journalists, we used to be treated like the Red Cross. We were the neutral zone. I have a souvenir T-shirt from a conflict zone from a couple of dozen years ago. It's a white T-shirt. In the front, in big, bold letters, it says, "Don't shoot." And in the back, it says, "Press." We used to announce ourselves. Could you imagine that now? It would be like putting a big fat target on your back, as unfortunately journalists have become the biggest prize, one of the biggest prizes in war zones and conflict zones. And even more unfortunately, the hostile treatment of journalists is not just limited to war zones anymore. It is a very different environment all over the world for journalists. I've had the opportunity to travel the world over and over again, meet popes and presidents and everyday people, and seen so much of humanity's best and worst. It has been sobering, humbling, and full of life lessons. Life, as you know, is full of challenges and opportunities. Sometimes challenges turn into opportunities, and sometimes those opportunities become challenges. I consider all of it gifts which help us grow and evolve as a person. When life has tested me with the real big ones, with the real tough times, with the real heartbreaks, I try not to take it personally or become a victim to it. I don't say, why me? Because frankly, why not me? Why anyone? I don't say, why me? Instead, I think, wow, me. As hard as it may be, I try to look at it as an opportunity to grow, to become stronger, to become more compassionate and empathetic towards others. It may not change the outcome, it probably won't, but certainly, the attitude we have while we're going through a difficult time will change that experience for us and those around us. People are not born leaders. We become leaders by how we respond and handle ourselves in the valleys of life and during those difficult times, and how we choose to apply the lessons that life has taught us. And depending on our life experiences and perspectives, the challenges we face can feel so different. I want to tell you about my ultimate teacher in life, my son, Payam. Whose name actually means message in Farsi, in Persian. Payam is a teenager. He's on the autism spectrum, and he's non-speaking. A couple of years ago, only a couple of years ago, at the age of 14, we finally had a communication breakthrough. Payam is now essentially able to communicate by spelling. He expresses his thoughts by pointing to an alphabet board, letter by letter, writing out his words and sentences. We shared our story in a very personal TEDx talk that I gave in order to help others open hearts and minds and change perceptions about autism. The talk is called The Power of Finding Your Voice. I invite you to watch it and share it with others who can benefit from it. For all those years, we had no sense of Payam's cognitive level. When we finally got a glimpse inside his thoughts, we realized he is wise beyond his years. Payam now uses his letterboard to advocate for others and share his message of equality and acceptance. He recently wrote, "My dream is for the entire world to abolish the pain those experience from unnecessary judgments because of each person's unique differences. People need to recognize how their attitudes are negatively impacting our growth for humanity as a whole." This message from my non-speaking teenage son on the autism spectrum. We never know what's inside someone until we give them a chance. Perception is not reality. Our passion and calling sometimes evolves and even changes. Giving voice to the voiceless was always my passion and joy as a journalist. It has now taken a completely different meaning as I advocate for my son and, as he calls them, other silent champions to ensure their voices are heard. My perspective has evolved throughout the years as an immigrant, as a journalist, and as a mother. I have seen both man-made and natural disasters turn lives upside down overnight. I didn't just cover revolutions. I lived through one personally and experienced my own life change dramatically after the 1979 revolution in Iran. As a journalist, I have seen countries self-destruct as one group has dehumanized another. I have seen fear show up as hate and intolerance, leading people to lose all perspective. I worry about how civility is breaking down. Not much shocks us anymore. We watch the news and the latest tragedy and outrage with a hopeless and helpless attitude, and we numb ourselves with meaningless material goods and are concerned about acquiring even more, while so many on this earth, on this very day, don't even have the basic essentials, such as clean water or safety. The thing is, none of us knows what life has in store for us. What if we end up in a war zone or a natural disaster zone, be designated into a discriminated group, or become disabled? Would we want to be treated the same way so many of our fellow human beings are treated under these same circumstances? Since we don't know what's down the road for any of us, shouldn't we, for no other reason but self-interest, be more responsive to the plight of others? Who knows, one day we might be the ones in need of a helping hand. The advancement of technology has democratized the media. The flow of information has been exponential. We have unprecedented access to knowledge, but are we more informed? I don't believe we are. We need to know the facts, reach across borders and barriers, marvel at our sameness, and find compassion and solutions for the less fortunate. Empathy and compassion. I want to wrap up by sharing a message from Payam. During one of his lessons, his teacher read to him about geysers at Yellowstone National Park. At the end of the lesson, his teacher asked him to write about what makes him erupt. This is what Payam wrote at the age of 14. Centuries of discrimination have created geysers of hate and intolerance. These acts erupt and hurt the children of the world needlessly. Teaching acceptance is my life's work. Teaching acceptance is my life's work. A message to believe in during these times of change. Class of 2018, I wish you a life full of learning and growth. Congratulations.
Thank you, Dr. Khosravi, for your inspiring remarks today. And of course, we wish you all the best in all of your endeavors, and Payam's as well.